My parents gave the family auto shop to my lazy younger brother. I was the one who kept it alive for years. So I left, took the customers, and let him sink it. Hey, Reddit, I usually only lurk here, but things have gotten out of hand, so I figured I would post here. I'm 30, female, Violet. I grew up in a small New York town where everyone knew everyone else's last name, and where the only thing people respected was how dirty your hands got by sundown. My hands were always dirty. My family owns a local auto shop, Walker's Auto, in the family since my granddad opened it back in the 60s with nothing but a couple of tools and a beat-up Ford. He used to call it his third child. The shop outlasted 2 recessions, a couple of floods, and more family fights than I can count. And through all of it, I was the one under the hoods. Not because I was the heir or the prodigy or anything, just because I didn't have a choice. Since I was 12, I was in that garage. Saturdays, summers, sick days, didn't matter. My dad didn't believe in rest. I was the designated parts runner, floor sweeper, oil stain scrubber. I learned how to change brake pads before I learned how to put on makeup. And the wild part is, I never complained. I actually loved the work, the smell of grease, the click of a perfect ratchet pull. I was proud of what we built, except we didn't include me. From the jump, my parents were obsessed with my younger brother, Dylan, 28. 2 years younger, same last name, completely different lives. I was the one under the car at H&Y AM. Dylan was still in bed playing Xbox, yelling at his friends through his headset. I once asked my mom why Dylan never had to help. She said, "He's not as responsible as you. You're better at this stuff." Translation: You do all the work because we know you won't fight us on it. They gave him everything. When he flunked out of his first semester of community college, they bought him a used Camaro to boost his confidence. Meanwhile, I was fixing up a '97 Dodge Ram. My granddad gave me a rust bucket, but it was mine. I spent months on that truck, nights after school, weekends after shifts, watching YouTube tutorials, calling scrapyards looking for the right parts. That truck was more than a car. It was the first thing I ever built on my own. Grandpa Joe used to walk past while I was working on it and say, "This shop's going to be yours one day, kid. You've got grit." That stuck with me. Still does. Then Dylan wrecked it. I was 18. Came home from a shift. Truck wasn't in the driveway. I thought maybe it got towed, or maybe I forgot to set the parking brake. Something dumb like that. Nah. Dylan had stolen the keys, took it joyriding to impress some girl, and T-boned a telephone pole. Front end crushed. Hood buckled. Radiator cracked open like a soda can. And you know what my parents said? "Violet, you should have hidden the keys better. You know your brother's impulsive." I swear, if I had any hope left in that moment, it got flattened like that grill. They didn't make him pay for it, didn't ground him, didn't even make him apologize. I had to clean the truck up myself on my day off. I still remember my dad muttering that I should be more careful next time, like it was my fault someone else stole my damn car. That's when I knew. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a tool, a wrench that walked and talked. Even after all that, I stayed. I kept working at the shop. After Grandpa passed, I stepped up even more. My dad started slipping, getting forgetful, short-tempered. I handled customer calls, ran invoices, taught myself bookkeeping so we wouldn't have to pay for some outside firm. Dylan showed up maybe twice a week, and when he did, he just got in the way. One time he stripped a bolt on a customer's wheel hub because he was texting while torquing it. You know how dangerous that is? Could have killed someone. My dad just brushed it off. He's learning. Meanwhile, I caught heat if I was 5 minutes late from grabbing lunch. My dog Max was the only one who ever acted like he saw me. He'd sit by my feet in the back office while I processed payroll, a rescue, half lab, half God knows what, loyal as hell. Every time I started to think maybe I was crazy for staying, I'd look down at him curled up on the mat and think, nah, I'm building something. This will all pay off. It had to, right? Then came Easter. Big family BBQ in our backyard. Tables set up, the whole extended clan there. Uncles, cousins, people I didn't even recognize. We were doing ribs and burgers, everyone acting like one big happy crew. And right there in front of everyone, my dad stands up and taps his glass like he's toasting a wedding. "I just want to say how proud I am of Dylan," he starts, "and I'm excited to officially announce that he'll be taking over Walker's Auto. We're passing the torch to the next generation." People clapped. I looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something, to look at me and go, "Wait, what about Violet?" But nope, just fake smiles and forks clinking on plates. I looked at my dad and said, "Are you serious?" He didn't even blink. "You made your choice, daughter. You chose animals." Nah, I didn't. I chose work. I chose responsibility. I chose to show up. I chose to believe in a promise my grandfather made me every day until the day he died. They just never chose me back. The Monday after that Easter announcement, I still went to the shop. Call it habit, call it stupidity. I'd been doing it for so long, walking away cold turkey didn't even feel possible. My alarm went off at 6:30, like always. Max followed me to the door, and I drove the same route I'd been driving since I was 16. I didn't even get halfway through my first coffee before I was standing in that same oil-stained parking lot. The thing about working in a family business is you don't just wear one hat. You're the mechanic, the accountant, the janitor, the one who runs to the parts store because someone forgot to order brake pads. And because it's family, none of that gets you a raise, a bonus, or even a thank you. It's just what you do. That morning, Dad was already in the office with Dylan. They were going over plans for the shop's future. My future apparently didn't make the meeting agenda. Dad didn't even look up when I walked in. Dylan smirked, like he'd just been made CEO of Tesla. "Vi, grab the transmission job in Bay 3, Dad said, without so much as a hello. Yeah, not good morning, not how are you doing, not even thanks for still showing up after we just publicly handed your job to someone else. Just a barked order like I was the weekend hire. Fine, whatever. I've always believed work speaks louder than words anyway. So, I got to it. The guy's Camry was on the lift within 10 minutes, and I was elbow deep in ATF before Dylan even wandered out to the shop floor. He was wearing one of those spotless shop shirts with his name embroidered on it, sleeves rolled up like he was about to do something useful. Spoiler, he didn't. He strolled around checking on things, which meant leaning on toolboxes and talking to customers like he actually fixed their cars. That's how it was every day after Easter. I did the actual work. Dylan played the part. He'd take pictures of himself pretending to work on an engine and post them online like he was the heartbeat of Walker's Auto. Customers who didn't know better ate it up. "Nice to see the next generation stepping up," they'd say. Meanwhile, I was the one on my knees wrestling with a seized bolt, sweat dripping into my eyes. Jack, my cousin, saw it all. He'd been working part-time at the shop since high school to save for trade school, and he wasn't blind to the favoritism. One slow Tuesday, he leaned over while we were replacing rotors and said, "If I were you, I'd be gone already." I told him I couldn't just bail. This was still Grandpa Joe's shop in my head, the place he built with his bare hands. I wasn't going to be the one who abandoned it, even if it had already abandoned me. Jack shook his head. "Loyalty's good, Vi, but not to people who wouldn't return it." I didn't answer, but the words stuck. The favoritism wasn't just at work. It was everywhere. If I came home 5 minutes late for Sunday dinner, Mom would be on me about respecting family time. Dylan could roll in 2 hours late with fast food in his hand and get a laugh, and a "traffic must have been bad, huh?" If I borrowed the shop truck for a supply run and forgot to top off the tank, Dad would act like I'd stolen his retirement fund. Dylan could leave the thing on E for 3 days and no one said a word. And then there was the smaller betrayal, the one before the big blow-up. Looking back, it was almost a warning shot. A few months after Easter, one of our regulars, Mr. Lewis, brought in his F-150 for brake work. I'd been handling his trucks for years. He trusted me. While I was working on it, Dylan came out and told me Dad wanted me to switch to another job because Dylan needed to get some hands-on time. Translation: let Dylan play with the expensive toy. I didn't love it, but fine. I moved over to the Subaru in Bay 1. Not an hour later, Mr. Lewis was back in the shop, red-faced, saying his truck's brakes were worse than before. Turns out Dylan forgot to torque the caliper bolts properly, and the whole assembly was rattling around. Dad's reaction? He told me it was my fault for not checking Dylan's work before the customer left. Like I'm supposed to be the unpaid quality control for someone who's supposedly in charge. That night, I went home pissed. Max sat by my feet while I scrolled job listings just to see what was out there, but something in me still couldn't pull the trigger. This was still my place, even if they'd given it to someone else. The work kept piling up. I was running payroll, ordering parts, fixing the actual cars, and training the part-timers. Dylan was doing business development, which, as far as I could tell, meant hanging out in the office and making calls to his buddies about weekend plans. Dad would gush about Dylan's leadership skills while ignoring the fact that every single repair order had my handwriting on it. Mom wasn't any better. She'd stop by the shop with lunch sometimes, always Dylan's favorite subs, never mine. She'd bring him coffee in the mornings, but never asked if I wanted one. Little things, but they add up when it's every damn day. Jack started talking more openly about it. "They're setting you up to get screwed, Violet," he said one Thursday night when we were closing up. "Dylan's the face. You're the hands. Guess who gets credit when it goes right and who gets blamed when it goes wrong?" I knew he was right, but I still showed up the next morning because that's what I did. One Friday afternoon, Dad called a staff meeting. All four of us, me, Dylan, Dad, and Jack, stood in the shop while Dad went over new procedures. Basically, Dylan was getting a raise to reflect his new responsibilities. My pay stayed exactly the same. Jack's too. Jack spoke up, which I'll never forget. "So Dylan gets more for standing around, and me and Vi keep doing the same work for the same money." Dad gave him that look, the one that says, "You're about 2 seconds from not having a job." Jack shut up, but the damage was done. I could tell Dylan was loving every second. The next few weeks, I noticed Dylan making bigger and bigger mistakes, ordering the wrong parts, forgetting to bill customers, double booking bays. Every time, Dad found a way to pin it on someone else, usually me. I stopped correcting him. Why waste the breath? Then came the day that nudged me closer to the edge. A supplier came by with a past due notice for almost $15,000 worth of parts. I knew we'd paid our invoices on time. I handled the checks myself. Turns out Dylan had redirected some of the payments to cover his own marketing expenses, which included a bunch of garbage like a neon shop sign we didn't need and branded hats nobody asked for. The worst part? Dad defended him, saying he was investing in the shop's image. That night, Jack texted me, "One day, you're going to realize you're the only reason that place is still open." I looked at Max, curled up on the couch, and for the first time, I started to believe it. People love to say, "Why didn't you just leave?" Like it's some magic fix for every crap situation. Easy to say when it's not your blood, your sweat, your damn fingerprints on the tools. I didn't stay because I was waiting for their approval or hoping they'd suddenly treat me fair. I stayed because Walker's Auto was still my shop, even if my name wasn't on the papers. Grandpa built it. I grew up in it. Every car that rolled through those bays had probably been touched by my hands at some point. You don't just walk away from that because someone decides your brother should play boss. And yeah, maybe part of it was ego. I wasn't about to hand Dylan the keys and let him drive the place into a ditch without at least trying to keep it alive. If I was going to walk away one day, I wanted it to be on my terms, not because they shoved me out. So I kept showing up. I was there before anyone else. Most mornings, Max would ride shotgun. I'd unlock the doors, kick on the lights, and start checking the day's appointments before the first wrench was even lifted. It's not that I wanted to impress Dad or Mom. Those days were gone. But customers still trusted me. They'd ask for me by name. Some had been bringing their cars to the shop since before I was born. If I wasn't there, I knew they'd start going somewhere else. And that would be one more excuse for Dad to say the business was struggling and hand more power to Dylan. Thing is, the more I worked, the more Dylan strutted. He'd walk in at 10 like he owned the place. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, wearing a jacket that looked like he bought it to stand next to a car, not work on one. He wasn't even pretending to put in effort anymore. He'd talk to customers like he was doing them a favor, then duck back into the office to scroll through Instagram. One morning, we had an old lady come in, Mrs. Grant, who drove a '98 Corolla that should have been in a museum for cars that shouldn't still be running. Sweet woman, but her car was making a horrible grinding sound. Dylan quoted her for new brakes and a new transmission, like he was trying to pay off the shop's debts in one sale. She looked like she was about to cry. I pulled her aside while he was on the phone and told her it was just the brakes. $300 job, tops. I fixed it myself that afternoon. Of course, Dylan found out, and instead of thanking me for not robbing a customer, he stormed out and told me I undermined his authority. I told him authority is earned, not handed out at a family BBQ. He didn't like that answer. Dad called me into the office later and told me to support Dylan's decisions from now on. I just stared at him and said, "Not if it means screwing people over." Then I walked out. I could hear him muttering something behind me, but I didn't care. Jack saw it all. He'd come in after his classes and help with tire changes or oil jobs, and we'd talk in the back when things slowed down. One day, while we were stacking tires, he said, You're basically keeping this place running by yourself. Yeah, I said. And that's why I'm still here, because if I walk, it's over. And I'm not letting Dylan tell people I quit on the family. Not yet. Jack nodded. Just don't let not yet turn into forever. I heard him, but I wasn't done proving my point. I wasn't done making sure customers still got honest work. And deep down, I wasn't done protecting Grandpa's legacy from being turned into some half-assed Instagram brand. But staying didn't mean staying quiet. A couple weeks later, I started keeping detailed logs. Every job I did, every part I ordered, every repair I fixed after Dylan's screw-ups. I wrote it all down. Not because I thought Dad would suddenly believe me, but because I knew one day this could matter. If things went south, I wanted records. I also started talking directly to suppliers instead of letting Dylan handle it. That's how I found out he'd been putting orders on credit without telling anyone, running up tabs in the thousands. He'd tell Dad it was strategic, like debt was just another tool. I knew better. It was lazy and reckless. The first time I brought it up, Dad waved it off. He's learning, he said. Same line I'd been hearing since Dylan stripped that bolt years ago. Same excuse, different mess. But here's the thing. Unlike before, I didn't just take it. I called Dylan out right there in the office. Learning on someone else's dime isn't learning. It's screwing the people who keep bailing you out. He laughed. Actually laughed in my face. You act like this is your shop. I didn't blink. It's more mine than yours, and you know it. Silence. Dad didn't jump in. Mom wasn't there to smooth things over. Dylan just shook his head and walked away. I could feel the tension spike, but I didn't care. I wasn't there to be liked anymore. Customers started noticing the cracks too. A couple regulars quietly asked me if everything was okay. Said Dylan seemed distracted. Said work took longer than it used to. I'd just tell them we were busy and change the subject. I wasn't about to start bad-mouthing my family to people outside. But inside, I was done protecting them from the truth. Then came the smaller breaking point, the one that really showed me how far gone things were. A guy named Carson came in with his Mustang. Needed a clutch replacement. Expensive job, but nothing we couldn't handle. I ordered the parts myself and set aside the next day to work on it. I show up that morning and the parts are gone, vanished. I look around, check the storage shelves, check the delivery logs, nothing. Then I see Dylan in the corner with his phone, grinning. Turns out he sold the clutch kit to one of his buddies off the books for cash. Said it was good networking. Carson's car sat on the lift for 4 extra days while I reordered everything. And of course, Dad blamed me for not keeping better track of inventory. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Max lying under my feet and told myself, one more. One more big screw-up from him, and I'm done. Not leaving because I'm tired. Not leaving because they want me gone. Leaving because I decide it's time. And I walk out with my head high and my work spotless. Yeah, maybe part of me wanted to stick around long enough to watch Dylan fail on his own. Not out of spite. Okay, maybe a little spite. But mostly because I wanted everyone to see that without me, the place couldn't run. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd been taking for granted. So I kept working, kept logging, kept my head down when it made sense, and spoke up when it didn't. And I waited, because every empire built on BS eventually collapses. And I wasn't going to miss the day this one finally cracked. If there's one thing I've learned about family businesses, it's that loyalty only works in one direction when favoritism is involved. And at Walker's Auto, that direction was toward Dylan. No matter what he broke, who he ticked off, or how much money he flushed, somehow it always became my problem. The big loss came in mid-September, right when business usually picks up because everyone wants their cars checked before winter. We had a major fleet account with a local construction company. 8 trucks we serviced regularly. They were good customers, paid on time, no drama, always brought work to us instead of the dealership. That account alone covered almost 1/3 of our monthly revenue. The boss over there, Mike, always called me directly. We had a system. He'd drop off a couple trucks at a time, I'd get them done within a week, and he'd pick them up ready to roll. Smooth, predictable. Until Dylan decided he wanted to streamline things. I came in on Monday and found out Dylan had convinced Mike to bring in all 8 trucks at once so we could do a bulk service and save them money. Sounds fine on paper, but we didn't have the manpower, the space, or the parts to do 8 trucks in one shot. That's the kind of thing you promise only if you've never actually turned a wrench. I told Dylan straight up, "This is a bad idea. We're going to bottleneck the shop, piss off other customers, and screw the schedule." He waved me off like I was being dramatic. "Relax, I've got it under control." Translation, I'm going to dump it on you and disappear. Sure enough, by Wednesday, we had 4 trucks torn apart, 3 more still waiting outside, and customers complaining their cars were stuck for days because the bays were full. To make it worse, Dylan ordered the wrong parts for 2 of the fleet trucks, rotors that didn't fit, and filters for the wrong engine model. I had to reorder everything overnight, which cost extra. Mike came by on Thursday, saw the chaos, and pulled the plug. He told us to put the trucks back together as they were and said he'd take his business elsewhere. Just like that, we lost a $90,000 a year account because Dylan wanted to play big shot manager. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time Dad would see it for what it was. You don't lose an account like that every day, and it was obvious who'd caused it. But when I got called into the office Friday morning, Dad was sitting behind the desk with Dylan leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, smirking like a kid who knows the teacher's on his side. "Violet," Dad started, "we took a big hit this week." "No kidding," I said, "and you know exactly why." Dad's jaw tightened. "I don't want attitude. The bottom line is we lost a client, and we have to make up the difference somewhere. We can't afford to take that kind of loss without cutting costs." I waited, expecting him to tell Dylan he was going to dock his pay or cut back on whatever junk he was spending shop money on. Instead, Dad leaned forward and said, "We're going to have to hold your salary this month." I laughed. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. "You're telling me Dylan tanks a major account and you're taking my paycheck?" "You're older. You can handle it," Dad said, like he was talking about lending someone a lawnmower. "Dylan's still finding his footing. We can't put that kind of pressure on him right now." I stared at him, then looked at Dylan. "You cost us $90,000 a year and you're still getting paid?" Dylan shrugged. "I'm not the one storming around like a toddler." I didn't even bother looking at him again. I wasn't giving him the satisfaction. I just sat back in the chair and let them think they'd won. Inside, I was already working out the math. They thought holding my pay would sting enough to make me swallow it and keep going. They didn't realize it was the exact move I'd been waiting for. I stood up, slow, calm. "All right," I said, almost like I was agreeing with them. "If that's how you want to play it, I'll work with it." Dad's eyebrows pulled together. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll see," I told him. "Just make sure you remember this day." Then I went straight to my locker, opened it, and pulled out my personal set of tools. Not the cheap, worn-out ones the shop owned, but the custom gear I'd bought myself over the years. The snap-on Torquey wrenches, the specialty sockets, the diagnostic scanner I'd saved months for. Every tool that actually made this shop run smoothly was mine, paid for in full, and I wasn't leaving a single one behind. Jack was swapping tires in Bay 2 when he noticed. "What's going on?" "They've been bleeding me dry for years," I said, loading my gear into the truck. "Now I'm going to make sure they remember exactly what I brought to this place and what happens when I'm gone." Jack just nodded. He didn't ask questions. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Max jumped into the passenger seat like he'd been waiting for this day too. I drove out without a single look back, but my mind was already lining up the pieces. I had contacts, customers who trusted me, suppliers who knew I paid on time, even a few mechanics in town who hated working for corporate shops and would jump ship for the right opportunity. All I had to do was set the plan in motion quietly. No shouting matches, no public scene, just a slow, controlled pull of every thread, holding Walker's auto together until it came apart in my hands. If they wanted Dylan to be the face of the shop, then I was going to make sure he was also the face people blamed when everything fell apart. When I drove away from the shop that day with my tools in the back and Max in the passenger seat, they probably thought I'd go home, sulk, and maybe come crawling back once my pride cooled down. That's how they'd trained themselves to think about me. The reliable one, the strong one, the woman who would never really walk away because she cared too much. All right, they didn't realize I'd been paying attention for years, not just to the cars, but to how the shop ran, who we depended on, and who we couldn't afford to piss off. If I was going to walk away, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was taking the one thing they couldn't replace: trust. And I already knew exactly how to do it. You don't just cut a shop's legs out by bad-mouthing them. That's amateur hour. You do it by making sure everyone who matters has your number before you disappear. First, the customers, not the random one-time oil change walk-ins. I'm talking the regulars, the people who called me directly instead of the shop line. I had at least 50 of them saved in my phone, all under first names with the car model: Mike, Silverado; Pete, Civic; Ralph, Jeep Wrangler. That's years of work right there. I sent them all the same text. Hey, it's Violet from Walker's. Not with the shop anymore. If you ever need work done, I'm setting up my own thing soon. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Nothing trashy, no digs at Dylan or my parents, just planting the seed. Then the suppliers. I had great standing with them because I paid on time every time, even when Dad dragged his feet. I called each rep personally, told them I was stepping away, but might have some side work coming. Every single one of them gave me their cell numbers and said to call any time. That told me everything I needed to know. The door was wide open. I wasn't about to open a full shop overnight. Too obvious, too loud. Instead, I rented a small 2-bay garage from a retired mechanic I knew. Old place, nothing fancy, but it had a lift, decent lighting, and a corner office where Max could sleep on an old dog bed while I worked. The rent was dirt cheap because the guy just wanted someone to keep the building from falling apart. I started slow. Brake jobs, small engine work, tire rotations. The kind of stuff that didn't require a lot of overhead. The regulars I'd texted started coming through one by one. I gave them fair prices, fast turnaround, and zero nonsense. They told their friends. I didn't even need to advertise. And because I was paying attention, I knew exactly which services Walker's Auto hated doing. The tedious ones that didn't make big money, but kept customers loyal. I took every single one of those jobs: wheel bearing replacements, electrical diagnostics, AC recharges in the middle of July. Bring them in. It didn't take long before I was booking 2 weeks out. Here's the thing about guys like Dylan: you don't have to destroy them. You just have to stop protecting them. Without me there to fix his screw-ups quietly, every single one became public. The Mustang clutch job? Botched. The Jeep lift kit? Installed wrong. Chewed through tires in a month. He started getting bad reviews online, the kind customers don't forget. And instead of fixing the problems, he'd argue with them, calling them too picky or blaming the parts. I didn't lift a finger to make that happen. I just stayed busy and kept my head down. But I did keep my ear to the ground. Jack would call me every couple of weeks with updates. Parts bills going unpaid, more missed deadlines, another good customer walking out. Every time I'd make a note. I wasn't just building a client list, I was building a case. 3 months in, I got my opening. One of our biggest shared accounts, a landscaping company with 15 trucks, called me directly. Their owner, Lewis, had been a Walker's Auto loyalist for 15 years, mostly because of me. He told me Dylan had missed a scheduled maintenance check. 2 trucks broke down in the same week, and when he complained, Dylan told him, "That's just how older trucks are." Luis asked if I could take over their fleet service. I said, "Yes, but only if you make a clean break from Walker's Auto. No half-and-half nonsense." He didn't even hesitate. That account alone was worth about $60,000 a year. When word got back to my parents, they called me. Not to apologize, not to admit they'd been wrong. Dad's voice was cold. "We hear you've been poaching customers." "No," I said. "I've been taking care of people you didn't value. There's a difference." Click. By month 5, my garage was running full tilt. I'd hired one part-timer, a kid from the tech school, and was seriously considering a second lift. The best part? Almost every major account Walker's Auto used to have was either with me or shopping around. Dylan was drowning, and I didn't have to lift a hand to push him under. That's when I pulled the real trigger. Remember those logs I'd been keeping before I left? Every part Dylan ordered wrong. Every redo I had to fix. Every customer I personally saved from walking out. I organized them, attached invoices, supplier receipts, time cards. It wasn't gossip. It was documented proof that Dylan's leadership had been bleeding the shop for years. Then I sent it all, neatly compiled in a single PDF, to 2 places: the bank that held the shop's business loan and the insurance company that handled their commercial policy. I didn't accuse anyone of fraud. I didn't need to. I just thought they might want to be aware of ongoing management issues that could impact their investment. In business, perception is everything. Suddenly, Walker's Auto wasn't a reliable account. It was a risk. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, Jack called me, laughing so hard he could barely get the words out. The bank froze their line of credit until they solved management concerns. Insurance wants a full audit. Your mom's losing it. Dylan's blaming the suppliers. Dad's blaming the economy. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just patted Max on the head and went back to work on a Tacoma that needed new struts. Because here's the thing about revenge. The best kind doesn't end in one big scene. It's a slow bleed. You take away what they took for granted, one piece at a time, until all that's left is the mess they made for themselves. After I walked out of Walker's Auto, I didn't go looking for something flashy. I found a small, quiet place on the edge of town, 2 bays, cracked concrete floor, and an office just big enough for a desk, a coffee maker, and Max's bed. Rent was cheap, work was steady, and for the first time in years, every dollar I earned stayed mine. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that was all I needed. The thing about slow damage is people rarely see it coming until it's already too late. By the time Walker's Auto was on its last legs, I didn't have to do anything anymore. The customers were gone, the suppliers didn't trust them, and the bank had them under a microscope. I just kept my head down in my own garage, booked solid for weeks. Then the phone calls started. First, it was Mom. "Violet, things are rough right now. Maybe you could come by and talk to your father." Translation: fix the mess Dylan made without admitting he made it. I told her I was busy, which was true. I had 3 trucks in the bay and a Civic halfway apart. Next, Dad called. No small talk. "Violet, we're losing customers because you took them." Not because Dylan couldn't do the job. Not because the shop had been mismanaged for years. Just straight up blaming me, like I'd robbed them at gunpoint. I didn't bother arguing. I just said, "I didn't take them. I kept them. You're the reason they left." Then I hung up. A week later, Jack sent me a text. "You might want to swing by the shop today, just for the view." I didn't want to admit I was curious, but I drove by anyway. The lot was half empty. No line of cars waiting, no customers in the lobby. One of the big bay doors was stuck halfway open, and there were weeds growing through the cracks in the lot. Weeds, in September. It looked like a place that had been abandoned for months, not a business trying to stay alive. The entitled parade came to my door 2 days later. I was closing up my shop for the night when I heard Max barking. I pulled up the front blinds and saw them, Mom, Dad, and Dylan, standing in my parking lot like they were here for some kind of intervention. Mom was holding a folder. Dad had his hands jammed into his jacket pockets. Dylan was leaning on a car like he owned the place. I stepped outside and kept the door mostly shut so Max wouldn't bolt. Dad started talking before I was even halfway down the steps. "We're in trouble, Violet. The bank's breathing down our necks, and without your help, Walker's Auto is going to close." I didn't say anything, just crossed my arms and waited. Mom stepped forward, her voice all soft, like she was negotiating with a stubborn kid. "Honey, this is still your family's legacy. You can't just watch it disappear. We need you back at the shop, just for a little while, until we get things stable again." Then Dylan piped up, smirking. "Yeah, and when you come back, we can figure out a way to make it work without all the drama." That one almost made me laugh. This guy ran the place into the ground and was still acting like I'd been the problem. "The offer?" I finally asked. "What exactly are you asking for?" Dad looked at Mom, then back at me. "We need you to bring your customers back, and we need you to put in at least 60 hours a week for the next few months. No pay until the shop's back in the black. Then we'll talk about what's fair." I just stared at him. They were standing in front of my own successful business, surrounded by cars people trusted. Me, to work on, telling me to abandon it so I could bail out the same people who'd shoved me out and stolen my paycheck. "That's your big plan?" I said. "I drop everything I built so Dylan can keep playing boss?" Mom sighed like I was being unreasonable. "This isn't about Dylan, it's about family." I shook my head. "No, this has always been about Dylan, and you made your choice a long time ago." The final nail. Dylan rolled his eyes. "You act like you're some genius who built everything from scratch. You just fix cars, Violet. Anybody can do that." I took a step toward him, not angry, just done. If anybody could do it, the shop wouldn't be collapsing right now. That shut him up. I looked at Dad. "You remember the day you told me I wasn't getting paid to make up for losses? That was the day I started making sure I'd never need you again. And I don't. You wanted Dylan to carry the legacy, so let him carry it." Mom started to say something else, but I cut her off. "I'm not coming back. I'm not loaning you money, and I'm not giving you my customers. You've got exactly what you asked for. Live with it." I turned and walked back into my shop, locked the door. Max sat at my feet, wagging his tail like it was over, and it was. By the end of the month, Walker's Auto was closed for renovations. 2 months later, the sign was gone, replaced by a for lease banner. People in town started bringing me stories about how it's a shame the family shop went under. I never corrected them. I just said, yeah, it is, and got back to work. Because that's the thing. I didn't destroy Walker's Auto, I just stopped saving it. When Walker's Auto shut down, it didn't just hit the business, it hit their whole lives. The bank took their house after they defaulted on the business loan. They ended up crammed into a rundown rental where the plumbing barely worked. Dad was doing odd jobs out of the back of a rusty pickup. Mom was working as a cashier. And Dylan? Dylan was sitting at home, looking for opportunities on his phone all day. Word about why the shop went under spread fast. No one wanted to hire Dylan, not even the chain shops desperate for cheap labor. Customers they used to brag about having were now in my bays, handing me keys and saying, "We wish we'd come to you sooner." I didn't gloat, I just did the work. It was a rainy Thursday when they showed up at my shop again, all three of them, standing in the lot like they owned the place. I stepped outside, arms crossed. Dad went first. "Violet, we need you back. We can get the shop going again if you bring your customers. We'll even talk about pay once things are steady." Mom added, "This is your family. You can't just turn your back on us." Dylan stood there smirking like it was a done deal. "You know you can't run from family forever." I looked at them, then at the shop behind me. My shop, my customers, my rules. "You had your chance," I said. "You made your choice. Now live with it." I turned and went back inside, locking the door. Max trotted over and laid at my feet. Outside, I could hear them still talking, but their voices faded.